All right, everybody. The clock says it's 2 p.m., top of the hour. So we're going to get started with our webinar today. I want to welcome everybody to BrainSell's digital transformation series. Today we're in part 4 of our digital transformation series, how to unify your tech stack, enabling seamless digital transformation. Yes. My name is Kevin Cook. I'm the Executive Vice President here at BrainSell Technologies. I have my longtime colleague with us, Tony Berry, who's going to be talking about the details, answering some questions about unifying that tech stack. Tony, go ahead and say hello.
Yeah, look forward to it, Kevin. So topic that's near and dear to me. So look forward to it.
Yeah, Tony and I have been on a few big projects like that. It's always great to get a chance to talk to him. BrainSell, for those of you who don't know, is a business software consultancy. We work with lots of vendors, but really we focus on growth strategy, growth, enabling you to grow and meet your business goals through that growth. And part of the growth for most companies these days, for many companies these days, is digital transformation. So while we talk a lot about individual technology, we do a lot of process mapping and consulting and making sure that whatever technology you choose works together. That's what they say as our sweet spot. Hackneyed phrase, but it is our sweet spot. But today it's digital transformation, part 4, the technology. That's what's really important in today's conversation. But we got to do a little bit of recap. I want to see where we've been, okay? Data was last week, and data is awfully important. I mean, Jordan did a great job with Liz talking about what to do with the data. We talk about data is the new oil, big data, how important data is. But data isn't just data. It's not just a spreadsheet. There's different types of data, different ways to process the data, different tools for the different types of data, and different ways you process it. And you can't go through a digital transformation without understanding your data. But once you do, you need to have some technology. And Jordan alluded to this last week. The tools, the analysis tools, but also the tech stack that could be the source for your data. For example, your line of business software like CRM, that could be a source of data. So that leads us into today's conversation about what those technology components could be and how you identify the right tech components to support your data model and your data while overall supporting your digital transformation. So what is digital transformation? Oh, let's take a poll. We're going to do a poll first, and we'll come back to the digital transformation. So the poll here. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm messing up Sarah by jumping all over the place. Okay, scale of 1 to 5. And 5 is the best. How satisfied are you with your existing tech stack? So think about the tools you're using today. However you define your tech stack, whatever the tools you're using today, how satisfied are you with what they do? So, as a tech rec, I love that. I love that tech rec. Mildly miffed. Who wrote these? These are great. Mildly miffed. Nah, it's okay. Yeah, okay. We got people are pretty much in the middle there. I'm not seeing anybody who's really happy with it. Well, all right, that's interesting. Now let's also apply the next question. What's the biggest challenge you face in unifying the tech stack? So think about your company. You may have maybe a lot of those people who are kind of number 3, I think, you're not really satisfied with the tech stack because you have budget constraints or you have data security concerns. So it'd be really interesting to find out how we correlate our satisfaction with the tech stack with your challenges. So you can go ahead and select those. We may be able to address those as we work through this. Oh, look at that. Wow. Finding the right solution. Wow, I'm surprised. Unanimity. You never have that. And it's interesting. So most people, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the tech stack, and because you don't have the right vendors. That's interesting. All right, so let's talk about digital transformation. A little definition of it. Digital transformation. It could mean different things for different people. So Tony, I'm gonna ask you to define what your perception of digital transformation, and then I'll give you my thoughts on digital transformation. So I'll let you start.
Sure. So I kind of like, first of all, the description here I think is a pretty good one. It's really looking at process, data, people, and technology. I mean, really looking at how can you digitize the business so that you can become, more agile, more efficient as an organization. So I kind of look at it's the proper application of those three to help the business, move at better speed and grow. And so that's really what these efforts tend to be.
Yeah, so I think of digital transformation, and we don't have to be exactly the same because everybody's going to have a different perception of what it is for their company. And I think of it much like you do, but I just condense it into, it's a rethinking how your business operates in the new internet age, rethinking how your business operates with respect to technology. You may be transforming things, but everybody's digital these days. So I guess you and I are pretty much in line, just a different way of saying it. All right, so let's talk about unifying that tech stack. Obviously, people in our audience are very interested in unifying the tech stack or doing better with it. So here's first question. What does a unified tech stack mean? Okay, let's define where we are. What's it mean in the context of digital transformation? Tony Barry, go.
Yeah. So it's I kind of look at this as what we've seen from customer experience is the unifying of the tech stack. Doesn't mean you have to go to a single tool or a single type of technology, but it is making sure the systems that you're using to support the major components of your business are interlinked and that they're being used around these ideas of business process areas. And I personally really like the way Microsoft describes this. They kind of talk about, think of your organization as having really 4 digital feedback loops. You've got customers, you've got operations, you've got products, and you've got employees. And how can you use technology in a unified way, to reuse the word, to support each of those key areas? And each area has processes within them. So like in customers, you've got something like lead to catch. So if you can figure out how to make that more seamless, your customer satisfaction goes up. Your basically time to money improves, et cetera. And so that's a good place to look at digital transformation. Operations, I think the pandemic taught us that fulfillment is not as easy as it used to be. And so now you need to look at, where and how can I ship and how can I get it there in this, high demand instant model that we've got from consumers and buyers today. Products, everybody's introducing new products. So that's another area you can look at. Digital transformations, how can we make that product launch more successful? And then the one that often doesn't get looked at from a technology standpoint, our experience is employees. So, how can I use technology seamlessly to help with onboarding and retention and skill building? There's some fantastic tools that are out there now that you can use in your tech stack to really become that learning and growing organization. So that's kind of how I look at it and how I define kind of the idea of a unified tech stack.
The notion of best of breed versus a platform play, does that fit into this question, the unified tech stack, or what?
I don't think it is. It's not an answer. It's certainly a consideration. So if you, as an organization, have a best of breed strategy, then you just want to make sure that those best of breed tools are communicating with each other, and you do get that seamless technology stack. Obviously, when you go more with a broader function tool set, from a single vendor or supplier, in theory, your integration should be better. But what we've often seen is a lot of times that stack got built through acquisition or some homegrown development that maybe wasn't as deep as what a best of breed. So you really have to look at that, because it's not a simple answer. And so it certainly depends upon your situation. And I know we're going to talk about kind of how you go about making sure that the outcome occurs, whether it's best of breed or a vendor-based set of solutions. So.
Outcomes matter. Okay, let's move on to question 2 then. So how can companies identify redundancies and gaps in their current technology stack? So obviously you don't want to have two CRM systems, two ERP systems. That's ridiculous. So, but it may not be as easy as that. There may be other kinds of redundancies that aren't as obvious as just two of the same kind of tool. So how do you identify that?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to probably answer this in what may seem like a counterintuitive way. So but bear with me. Um, I'm going to say that the key to really identifying those gaps and reducing redundancies is to move the focus away from just technology and focus on really three aspects. Focus on people, and these are in this order: people, process, and technology. We often see that people think digital transformation is just go buy the right tools, hook them up together, integrate them, and the job is done. But it really isn't. You have to start with your people first, because digital transformation by its nature crosses functional areas. So sales and marketing now have to get along. Product has to be working with marketing, and sales as that new product that's introduced. People need to be tooled. So it's really got a huge people aspect. And so we recommend starting there as one. Is the organization from a people standpoint ready? Or is there some readiness that we need to do, some change management in terms of training, getting people data ready? AI is causing a lot of this. Is how can I get people more AI ready? Then look at your processes. This is the piece that often can get jumped, but it will identify those gaps the best way. Take something like lead to cash. Just walk that through an organization and look at how many systems it touches, how many people it touches, and where are the transition or friction points. And that will then start to tell you that technology map, let's call it, or blueprint as we call it, that you can now use technology to take away those friction points. So we've actually created, and it's a sister series to this, something we call our blueprint process that does exactly this. Looks at your people, your process, and technology, and creates that roadmap. And then you can start working on, how to reduce those gaps and redundancies in the organization. Because again, they may not be technology gaps, they might be skill gaps, or they might be process gaps. So.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. A very good point. You've always said we started using this years ago, and I believe this was you got us doing this people and process and technology. And then I had one of my customers loved it, and he said it's people, process, technology, then people again.
There you go.
And you're loop back.
I'll throw in a little data in there too, because we think data is kind of key underneath all. I 100% agree with you.
So okay, let's say we've gone through those processes. Now this is Q3, question 3. So you've understood where the gaps are. You've got your people in the process down, maybe, or maybe not. But what are the first steps then after you've identified the people and you've gone through that non-tech step?
Yep.
In consolidating.
Yeah, and it's this is a really good point, because it's one of the things is obviously these initiatives can put pressure on an organization, right? Because it is cross-functional. It is looking at those three areas. So what we often recommend is you're starting to work through this and you want to start to pull these systems together into a common stack. You can't do it all at once typically. So start with those big points of friction, those tender spots in the organization that you'll get some quick benefit from. We're working with a company right now where it's interesting. They've got a really good marketing function going on. They've got a really good sales operation going on from an opportunity standpoint, but the leads from marketing into sales literally get manually keyed in because those systems were never unified. And so that's where we're focusing first. We've got a whole roadmap that's going to take 18 months, but we're going to fix that in the first 30 to 60 days and make that much more automated. And it does several things. It streamlines the process. It takes that friction out. It gets a lead over to sales much quicker. And they're in the business where the first interaction is often the winner. And so this is going to help them with that. So that's a good example of a friction point. We often see friction points too, as you kind of go from sales to finance. There's some areas you can do there so that the sales team can see things like receivables and things like that, so they have some customer knowledge, but it's not coming out of their CRM tool. So we'll start with those kind of friction points, and then that will tell us how to bring the systems together.
Okay, I'm going to skip a question here. I'm going to go. We had a bunch of questions put together, but I see a natural transition to a different question. Question number 5 we had is the key considerations for integration, because you just talked about the disparate systems and getting the leads into the system as this company that was still manually keying them in. So that implies integration and legacy systems, bring those legacy systems in. So that's why I wanted to jump forward.
No, this to me is a great example too of don't try and boil that ocean. You know, most organizations have, I think I saw recently, most upper mid-market companies have as many as 100 different systems. And at first people go, there's no way. But then you have to start thinking about the spreadsheets and the legacy systems and all of the things that you need to do as an organization to make it work. And so often there's this thinking as you start digital transformation, well, I've got to throw away that ERP system and start over because maybe it's an older system. And that isn't always correct, or at least it's not correct in the near term, because that's a big effort, right? To replace an ERP system. So often what we'll suggest is instead, let's look at an integration layer. Let's use some of the newer technology that's out there, things like what's called a modern data platform and some reverse approaches to integration. So the nice thing with legacy systems is sometimes they're pretty easy to get access to, but they're not always easy to integrate with. And so instead, let's just get the data out of the legacy system and then let's show it in other systems or pull it together from a reporting standpoint, because as they say in the South, there's gold in their hills if we'll dig into them. And so we've done that with a lot of companies recently. In fact, we've developed some technology ourselves, something we call Interlude, that will pull that data into a modern data platform. Then you can put things like dashboards on top of it. You can do the integration, or you can even push data into another system. Got one client, I think it's a 10-year-old ERP, still works. They're going to replace it. In fact, we're in the midst of doing that right now. But we started 2 years ago with just taking the data out of the ERP system and pushing it into their CRM, so they can see things like sales history and sales total and even some invoice details. And we did that through this modern data approach. So I think you have to replace legacy systems. So we'll figure out a way sometime. So.
And that's really important. Last week, Jordan was talking about that, the data. And so what you just described isn't a point-to-point integration. It's when there's some analysis or some transformation, you're working with the data in between. So it's not just push the name from this tool to that tool to that tool. You got to do something with the data in between. So that's an important point.
Jordan lives and breathes this, so I would go watch that video, but he describes it really, really well. This idea of using data as kind of the pinning layer for these efforts. So.
Right, but that does play into the tech stack, the technology that you use for all of
100%.
that.
Yeah. Unify does not mean replace always. Sometimes it means augment or enhance.
That's right. So you have to select the right vendors, which is a great segue to number 6. Question number 6. So how should a company approach a vendor selection, whether it's replace or stick with? And vendor selection does not mean replace necessarily. It may mean that you already have the right vendor for some of your tools. So talk to us about that selecting.
Yeah. And especially if you're thinking about digital transformation rather than implementing a tool. So, digital transformation means more than setting up a marketing tool or setting up, an ERP or a CRM. It really means getting those unified systems to work across those full life cycles. So one of the things that we recommend is if you're looking for somebody to help you with that, look at somebody who's done it before. It is different. It's not an implementation by itself. It's really now looking again across all those functions. So look for a vendor that's done it before, and I would probably change that term vendor to partner, and then look for somebody that you can partner with on this. Because a lot of times what we find with our digital transformation efforts, there's a lot of skill internal at organizations that have the domain knowledge that is actually needed, and they become part of that integrated team. So it isn't you bring the vendor in, you implement, and you leave. You actually partner instead, and you may do some work as the customer along with the vendor that you brought in to assist you with. So it really is truly a partnership approach. So look for somebody who's done it before, somebody who takes that partnership attitude, and then one that will help you on the people and the process side too, not just a technology implementer. So those would be my kind of 3 litmus tests that I would put if I were going out to select someone.
Okay. I got a few more questions, and you're making me think of new ones, but I don't want to go too far off of our prepared notions, our prepared thoughts here. But everybody's talking about AI, right?
Sure.
AI, machine learning these days. So this is question number 7. how can AI machine learning contribute to a unified tech stack? And maybe the answer is it can't. But I wanted to make sure, we wanted to make sure we address it here because everybody's thinking about this, right? So is there a role for AI and other stuff like that?
It's interesting. We talked about this one actually at length before doing this, because it is obviously the thing we're all seeing is that all the work with AI. So probably the first thing I would say is you want to think again in the digital transformation space. Want to think about this from a standpoint of not thinking that AI is miraculously going to solve all this and you push a button and the bot tells you what to do. But where AI can really help is in an assistant standpoint. So it can often be a gap filler. Jordan was showing me recently there was some data that needed to be cleaned up for a customer, and he ran it through one of the chat bots to clean the data up, and it did an extremely good job of that, because that's one of the first things you've got to do as you unify systems is get that data so that it's consistent across system to system. And so the bots are doing a very good job of data cleansing. They're also extremely helpful with unified search. So if I've got things in multiple systems, I'm bringing it now into that modern data platform, put and train a bot on top of that, especially if you've got something complex in your business, SOPs, et cetera, a bot can be taught some of that domain knowledge, and it now becomes a great source of corporate answers. And then we already talked about data cleansing. The other thing that happens with digital transformation, which I think is an interesting thing where AI can help, when you bring systems together, there's a security consideration. PII can show up in systems where you didn't mean it to. And so you want to make sure you're looking at that. Am I removing PII in certain systems? Marketing systems come to mind where you may not want to have some of that identity information in your tools. And AI can help a great deal with that. Say, hey, this note over here looks an awful lot like it's got a name, a phone number, and a birth date in it. Would you like me to remove it? I mean, that's some of the stuff that AI is just fantastic at, because it can do those ad hoc searches so well.
Yeah. I wrote an algorithm a while back that actually identified data like that in unstructured words and phrases like that in unstructured data. I'm going to skip to our question number 9, because data governance. So how does data governance, process optimization factor into unified tech stack? So what you're just referring to, you got that PII, but you've also got to have some data governance tied in with your compliance or your security.
Yep, so 100%. Yeah, we find at its core digital transformation, because you're digitizing many things in the business. Data is now really the gluing element. I think you mentioned, Kevin, it's the new oil of the organization, and you're bringing it into now typically a centralized store. But now that means you've got data from different systems that may or may not be the most valid data source. And so now that's what data governance is all about. Is it's going to bring all this data together. How do I know what is good data, what is okay data, and what is bad data?
So it's not just get it all. It's get the right data, not just get all the data.
And classify it, and it's who should see and have access to it, and how do we curate it so that people in the organization don't have to become data scientists or data engineers. And so that's really what the data governance and process optimization will be. Often overlooked. And so as we do our blueprinting process, we make sure that's one of the key initiatives, making sure you've got proper data and process governance in the organization.
All right. Yeah, good to know. So I'd like to turn this around. We need to wrap up here soon, because getting a wrap sign from our producer. So I want to turn this around so the audience members, the people watching, listening, and who are going to see this in the future, instead of us just talking about the things, what should the people in the audience look for as signs that a unified tech stack? So what are the signs that the tech stack is driving value, or the opposite, needs to be transformed?
Great question. Yeah, what we recommend is you're doing that planning and you find these points of friction. Almost always there are a couple KPIs that you can put around those friction points that kind of give you the current state that you can then monitor as you move forward. So a good, we talked about lead to cash. So one of the good things there is that cycle time. What does it take for a new lead to go all the way through and become an order, get invoiced, and get paid? Figure out on average what that is for your different customer types, put a KPI around that, If digital transformation is working, that should shorten, and you should get more of them. And so those become two of the KPIs. You can do anything where you're doing conversions, kind of the standard finance KPIs come in place. Get that kind of balanced scorecard thought out, make it visible. We like to do this, put a dashboard on top of it and share it with the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And not only does it show you how you're doing from your digital transformation effort, but it's got a nice change management component to it too, because you're teaching people now to start to understand the digitization of the business and how to monitor if that's successful or not. And you may find things that aren't working, and this will tell you where to correct too.
So I'm going to riff on that. This is part A, that same question. I'm making this up now because I did a seminar a while back on automation. And the leader, the guy who taught it, said the first two questions to ask are, can it be automated and should it be automated? So I'm going to apply that to digital transformation. Are there similar questions? And is it possible to say this part of our process should not be transformed? Okay, so back to this, what are the signs? How do you identify what should not be transformed? Or things that just should stay as they are?
Yeah, if you do a proper kind of blueprint analysis, you're going to find the areas too that are working really well, and some areas where it's working well enough that you don't want to take undue risk, especially in things around customer satisfaction. If you've got, good example we see often is, should I do away with my support team and this is where AI comes in, let AI handle all my service requests? Could that be automated? Absolutely. Should it be automated is the question, because you may find that people interaction is one of your differentiators. I know we have a client that they make a big deal of that. You get a real person on the phone when you call in, and that real person has access to your client information so they can give you a real answer. We're not trying to deflect you. We're not trying to do all the things that bots can do. And so that's an area where you maybe don't want to automate too much, but rather give aids to those people that are the front line, so they can better serve their customers. So don't necessarily automate that, but augment it. And so it's kind of a different approach for some of these people aspects of the business.
Okay, yeah. So I just talked to a customer today, and they were talking about all the systems and the changes. It wasn't technically digital transformation, but it was a lot of stuff coming into a discussion about new business systems. And they're talking about integration. And my question is, why? You're really just once a day making sure you don't need to do an update. You can do that manually, can't you? It'll take you 2 minutes, or do it once a week. If there's no need to transform that part of their process. All right, we're coming up against the time here. So can you give us a quick synopsis, and then I'm going to go into what's coming up next. But the last thing here, quick synopsis of a success story, an example. You touched on this before.
Yeah, so a great one that I like to talk about. We recently worked with a cybersecurity company who had just gone through a merger, essentially an acquisition of a sister company of similar size. And they ended up at the end of that with 2 ERPs, 2 CRMs, 2 marketing tools, 1 project management system on one side, and one whole bunch of Excels trying to manage on the other. But what they did, which I think was really smart, is they didn't say, we're going to throw this side out and we're going to keep this side. Instead, they said, let's look at the future state of what this combined org is going to be selling and the products we're going to be delivering to the market and our 5-year plan. And let's go through the people and the process side of that, and let's design that future state organization. Then let's go back and apply that roadmap around the systems that we want to keep. Process is exactly what you were saying, Kevin, that we want to keep as they are, and those that we want to improve. And then they went on the journey. So they narrowed down to 1 CRM. We used a data layer in the middle to bring that together. They went to the ERP that the acquired company had because it was more sophisticated. They decided to keep marketing as it was short term, and then move to a future state marketing, which came after the initial integration project. So just as we described, they didn't try to do it all at once. They did it in bite-sized pieces. They focused and let people and process drive those decisions, and they had an extremely successful outcome. And they're growing like crazy. So we think it was a very successful effort for them.
Yeah, that's great. A plan that they can refer back to over time too. Okay, next up, Tony, thanks a ton here. But next up, unlocking the future, exploring AI-powered digital transformation strategies. AI-powered, there's that AI stuff again. It's gonna be next Friday, November 17th, same bat time, same bat channel. And I just might be on that one too, because I love talking about AI and nerdy stuff. We've talked about all this digital transformation. So if anybody who's watching this wants to know more, we've got this great ebook. I actually did download the ebook myself because I wanted to read through it. We've got a great team here. They put together a very helpful ebook, 5 key components to enable growth and scale. And it's all about the things we've been talking about in this series. There's a section on data, there's a section on the tech stack. And then you also get a 20-minute consultation if you want to. So like Tony said, it's not just that automation, not just the ebook, it's also the person you got to talk to. So make sure you sign up, download the ebook, and then get a consultation with one of us to talk about your digital transformation, how you can be better prepared. Thank you, Tony, for doing this. It's always great to chat with you.
Oh, always love this stuff.
Everybody in the audience and the people who are going to watch in the future, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, you know how to reach us. Phone, email, website.